I am really looking forward to today's session. We are at the wonderful Springvale Fisheries. This place is just outside Newark. This is fast becoming one of my favourite commercial fisheries. There's roads around every lake. Every lake is full of fish. It's a peaceful environment. What more could you want? And today we've got the ideal lake and peg that we can do some short range method or hybrid fishing up against an island. There's loads of other species in these lakes, so you never quite know what you're going to hook when that tip goes round. It's a beautiful day, so the shades are going to go on. I cannot wait to get started. It often slows down the breakdown and that reveal of the hook bait that I find is so important. The softness of that rod is going to help me land more fish. As the feeder hits the clip, that rod will bend over and I can almost lower the feeder into the water. There's loads of tension here, so it's a breath of fresh air to come to a venue that's stocked with tench. There's two baits that I've got ultra reliance on when it comes to this style of fishing. First of all, we need micro pellets. Staple fodder when we're fishing hybrid feeder, method feeder tactics. Soaked micros work brilliantly well around a feeder or inside a feeder, and they catch every species that you can think of in any commercial up and down the country. Now, the pellets that are available here at Springvale, a fishery only pellet. These are actually a Coppins style pellet, which I know some of you might have a few issues preparing because sometimes they go super sticky or sometimes they just end up as a big ball if you get them wrong. Now, what I find is best to do with preparing these pellets is to add water a little at a time, almost like you're mixing ground bait. So with these particular pellets, I've put them in a tub, I've added a little bit of water, come back to them a little bit later, maybe 10 minutes later, added a little bit more, really gone softly with adding the water. And what we've ended up with are some pellets that are really soft, but I can squeeze into a ball and they don't turn into a big ball of putty. They actually stay as individual pellets, and you can see there, they actually want to break up, which is one of the things that I'm looking for. When I'm looking to fish method or hybrid feeder tactics, for me, it's all about the reveal of the hook bait. Often we're burying our hook bait inside the little ball of feed, and we want that ball of feed to open up and reveal our hook bait almost as soon as that feeder hits the bottom. So to get your pellets nice and springy and spongy, that's the end goal for me. So we've got those pellets there, and to those pellets, my addition is going to be this. This is swim steam green. This is the feeder ground bait. The feeder ground bait has got slightly larger particles in. So obviously swim steam green has been an amazing ground bait for years and years and years. This is just maybe a slightly updated version, slightly bigger particles, slightly more fish meal, makes it ideal for targeting these carp on this sort of venue. Now, ground bait, when you're adding it to a method feeder or hybrid feeder mix, ground bait, it often slows down the breakdown and that reveal of the hook bait that I find is so important. So you've got to be a little bit careful how you mix your ground bait. I don't want to mix it really heavy. I still want a little bit of dryness there. You can see there that when I make a ball, there's still some spring there. But what this ground bait is going to do is it's going to fill the cracks in between those pellets when I make the ball of feed around my hook bait, and it's going to stop the water or slow it from getting in amongst the pellets. It's going to slow the breakdown of that ball down. So I need to make my feed, and to start with, I'm just going to eye it in. I'm just going to get a couple of handfuls of pellets. I've got my working tub here. This tub will change throughout the day, the ratios of ground bait and pellets, and I'm going to put in maybe a couple of handfuls of pellets because I know that the fish love pellets, so I want to feed some pellets. And then to those pellets, let's start off with maybe one, let's just get a sort of like a 50-50 ratio, 2 handfuls of ground bait, get a nice 50-50 ratio. And I think when I'm putting that on my feeder, I can make that perfect little ball, and once in the water it's going to break down beautifully and reveal my hook bait. talking of hook baits, once I start using ground bait, I think that maggots are the go-to bait. I think the smaller particles of ground bait just lend itself perfectly to a really lightweight bait. And I've got here some red maggots. Now, all I've done is I've actually got the maggots from the fishery this morning. They're a super fresh maggot here. They get the bait so fresh. And I put them in some water. Within about 20-30 minutes, those maggots will all be dead, but they're all starting to die now. A top tip for you, if you are struggling to get your maggots to die, or you've just bought some maggots on the morning of the session, is to roll them on your leg. So we used to do this years ago. If we fancied a dead maggot, we'd just get our single maggot and we'd roll the maggot on our leg. Literally takes 5 or 6 seconds, and all of a sudden you've got a dead maggot. A brilliant way of just killing single maggots if you've just got a tub full of live maggots. But for this session, should be quite quick fishing. I'm going to try and get these maggots, most of them dead anyway, and we can bait up really, really fast. So there we go, really super bait selection. Pellets, ground bait, a working tub where I'm going to mix it up throughout the day. Single and double maggot hook baits. What could go wrong? Fantastic session at Makins Fishery, another well-known commercial fishery, a few weeks ago. And you know what made that session exceptionally enjoyable was the rod that I was using. This F1 feeder, this 9-foot CTX F1 feeder, is a beautiful rod for your little short chucks on commercial fisheries. Perfect for obviously F1s, as the name suggests, but also when you're catching carp up to double figures, smaller hooks, little feeders. This rod is absolutely stunning. Beautiful little wand in your hand. And I used this rod the other week at Makins to catch loads of fish. So I thought we'd bring this rod to Springvale, give it another workout for you guys. Now, the reason that I like this really soft through action 9-footer is we're using small hooks. It's inline feeders only here today. That's one of the rules stipulated by Springvale. And the softness of that rod is going to help me land more fish. That's also the fact that it's a beautiful way of catching fish, because you can feel every nod of the fish and you see all the bites beautifully. But the softness in that blank is going to help me land far more fish than a rod that is like a poker and it's nice and stiff, because those stiff rods are brilliant for casting big distances, but for actually landing fish and for playing fish, they're just not as enjoyable. So my choice today is the F1 feeder. It's 9 foot, it's a CTX rod from the CTX range. It's not going to break the bank by any means, but I think it's an absolutely wonderful piece of kit. Now, I've coupled that with a 4,000 size reel. This reel is loaded with 020 line. Now, a lot of people would say, you're fishing for carp, you probably want a bit stronger line than that. This suffix line that I'm using is very strong for its stated breaking strain, for its stated diameter, should I say. So I haven't got any worries about the line breaking, but the thin diameter is going to give me a massive advantage. We've got a bit of a side wind today, and I want to cast this nice light feeder over to that island. The shelf's going to be quite steep over there, and I want the feeder to stay put for as long as possible on the bottom in the same space. If I was to use a heavy main line, I've got a big chance of the wind or any drag on the water grabbing that heavy thick main line and pulling that feeder away from where it's landed. I don't want that. I want the feeder to stay in exactly the same spot. So let's talk about the feeder. In line, as obviously the fishery rules state, this is a 25 gram feeder. This is a Cresta feeder. It's one of the size feeders that I really like to use. It's an in-between size. If I was going to give this a feeder a size, it's going to be medium, say, because you can get some very, very large feeders maybe a size feeder that I would chuck at somewhere like Boddington or Barston, and then you could get some little tiny feeders for chucking up to little islands at places like Lindome or my local venue Holly Farm. But this is a medium-sized feeder. It's going to hold enough bait to attract fish and keep fish in the area, but also not too much that it's going to get too messy down there and the fish are going to miss my hook bait. I think it's a lovely little size. So running freely on the line, we've got one of these quick change beads that stops the feeder. To that, I've got a hook length of 4 inches. Again, the rules here state 4 inches is the minimum hook length, so we're going with that. And that's 4 inches of 0.14, and I've got a size 16 barbless hook. That is such a simple rig. Today's all going to be all about using the simple gear, the right gear, but making use of the baits that we have got available to us. It's certainly hectic fishing here at Springvale, and some of the fish we're catching are absolutely beautiful. This is a lovely mirror by the looks of it. This little tiny hybrid feeder is definitely doing the damage. Look at the bend on the rod, bending all the way through, which is what we want to see. And it just means we get more fish in the net. He's an absolutely wonderful fish, he is. The other great thing about Springvale is that all your keep nets and your landing nets are supplied for you, so when you've had a great day's fishing, you haven't got to worry about stinky, smelly nets in the back of the car on the way home. But this guy only just fit into that landing net. See if we can hold him up for it. It's a warm day, so we're not bothering with a keep net, we're just putting fish back straight away. But look at that. Another Springvale beauty. Probably got to be getting on for £8, something like that. Maybe even a little bit more. Back you go, mate. Lovely fish. Right, gives us a few seconds to talk about just how we're fishing this method and the approach to it, really. So when I got to the peg, I had a cast around. I wanted to set the line clip on my reel, and what I like to do is I like to finish the cast with my rod up in the air so that feeder can land as tight to that far island as possible. That's the clip that I like to set. So I use the softness of the rod. I cast out, use the softness of the rod to absorb the pressure of that feeder flying through the air. As the feeder hits the clip, that rod will bend over and I can almost lower the feeder into the water. That's the plan anyway. And like I say, I want to try and land the feeder at this time of year as close to any cover as possible. As long as I'm casting into something like a foot of water, that's probably my minimum depth, I'm more than happy at this time of year. And I can go to venues and you'll see the tails hitting the surface of breaking the surface as the fish are around your method feeder, and they're brilliant days. So don't be scared about casting into too shallow water, especially if the sun's out. What I have been doing though is I've been mixing it up a little bit. So whereas when I cast out I might end with my rod at this sort of angle to hit the sort of really shallow water next to the island, I've sometimes been finishing the cast with my rod further back here. That just means that I'm dropping the feeder a little bit shorter, slightly deeper water. I've been getting a few tench today. I've found that they're a little bit closer to the island than the carp. So by dropping the feeder back a couple of casts, maybe 1 in 10 casts, something like that, dropping it a little bit further back, I'm spreading the feed around a little bit, and I've found that those carp have just hung back a little bit from where those tench are really aggressively feeding right next to the island over the bulk of my bait. So there's a little tip for you. You don't have to constantly hit the same spot. The other thing that I think we need to touch on is how we've been loading this feeder. So I found that double maggot has been really good. So we've got our double maggot hook bait, double dead red. Where do you go and then that doesn't work? It's a superb hook bait. And when I've been putting my bait in this feeder, my 50-50 pellet and ground bait mix, I've been wedging that first layer in just so I know that it's going to come out, but I want it to survive the impact, and I want it to get to the bottom in one piece. But I know that when I hook a fish, I'm going to leave most of it in the swim to feed the rest of the swim. And because I want to get quick bites, I've just been putting a tiny little layer over the top and just using my thumb just to lightly press that on. It just protects the hook bait as it goes in the water. If I do manage to overcast, which occasionally we all do that, and it hits the far bank vegetation, I've got a really good chance of getting my feeder back, and it just protects everything. That will go to the bottom in one piece, and all of a sudden I've got the perfect trap sitting there in the water. You can see my hook length is probably a little bit worse for wear at the minute, especially after catching that big fish. That's probably due a change. That's another important thing, you know, when you're method feeder fishing. This area of your terminal tackle takes a hell of a beating. The line from the feeder to your hook takes a lot of punishment because you're tucking it back all around this, you know, metal feeder, plus your hook point. You've got to make sure that hook point stays mega sharp, and I just do that by, whenever I feel there's a little bit of pressure there when I hook this maggot, or when you're hooking your hook bait, if there's any sort of pressure there, or any sort of, I have to give it a little bit more than I should, that means that hook point's not as needle sharp as it should be. I'll just change my hook length for a new one. You're relying on that super sharp hook point to prick the fish's mouth. That'll force it to bolt, and you'll get those lovely method feeder bites. Let's have another chuck out. We've had some lovely carp today, but one of the fish that we're catching a hell of a lot of are tench. There's loads of tench in this lake, and you know, in some fisheries where you've got quite a lot of F1s mixed in with a few carp, Sue, the owner here, has decided not to stock any F1s, so her smaller fish, let's call them, are tench. There's loads in here, and those tench feed very similar to the F1s in probably your local commercial. And it's a really good opportunity, because I'm using my little 9-foot F1 feeder rod, to run through a few little tactics that you'd probably use for catching those smaller species like F1s, or in this case tench. So first of all, I've still got my nice big hook, but I'm putting on a single maggot. So single maggot, lots of hook points showing. I'm expecting quick bites, and I want the fish to hook themselves. Making sure that hook point is super sharp is really important, because obviously the fish are a bit smaller. They've not got the weight behind them to drive hook point home as easily, so you want to make sure that hook point's really sharp. Single maggot, I'm going to put the first layer in the same as I have been all day, so nice firm first layer in that feeder. Second layer, just putting a little tiny bit on, so you can see there that the maggot is proud straight away. It's not going to take hardly any time for that ground bait to break down, soften, fish can come in, suck that bait up really, really quickly. Now, the casting out and the actual fishing for these F1s, or tench, as I call them F1s, but it's tench we're targeting today. We're going to be a little bit more active with our fishing style. So what I'm not going to do is just cast out, put the rod in the rest, like you probably can do when you're carp fishing. I need to make sure that the line is reasonably tight. We're using an inline feeder today. There's not a lot of pressure there for the fish to hook themselves against, so we want to make sure that there's a reasonably tight line between the feeder, made a right mess of that, the feeder and the rod tip, because I want those fish to be rattling against the rod tip all the time, making sure that we hook them as efficiently as possible. So I'm going to cast out, hit the clip, feeder in the water, and now I'm tightening down straight away, and I'm not even putting my rod on the rest. I'm just holding that rod tip just above or level with the surface. I want to make sure that line sinks, because I know, you can see little rod tip, there we go, and we've got one. So we're trying to keep everything as tight as we can. We don't want a really big bend in the tip, because that big bend in the tip is going to pull the feeder off of that far shelf. And we want to keep a nice little bend in the tip so we can see everything, because we are going to get a few dropbacks to fish in this method. There's a little tench, look. This is what I mean, he's a tench probably about 10 ounces, which is, I'm going to say, probably standard size of a lot of F1s in a lot of venues. We'll unhook him, see if we can get another one. Like I say, there's loads of tench in here. It's a breath of fresh air to come to a venue that's stocked with tench, because I know loads of you guys like fishing for tench. And you could certainly put a weight of them together on this lake. This is Newcastle Lake, and I think there's more tench, well, there seems to be more tench in here than a lot of the other lakes. So if you are coming for a day's tench fishing, this is the lake to come on. So look, putting that first layer in, you can see how quick we had that bite on that last cast, so we don't want to bury that maggot. We're just literally tapping him on top with a tiny bit of ground bait. We want it to come free almost straight away. Feed her out, in she goes, and then we're just gonna, rod's not on the rest, we're just keeping that tight line. I mean, if it was really windy today, I'd probably have to follow that feeder with my, oh, we missed him. Follow that rod, follow the bow out with my rod tip if it was really windy, because just like stick float fishing, you know, following that rod tip out. The wind isn't so bad today, and we are using this light main line, which is making things a lot easier. It's a really busy way of fishing. Just literally tap him on. Bit to the right, shouldn't be a problem, there's that many over there. So we're keeping that bend in the tip all the time. They're so fast at shaking their head and getting rid of that hook point. So you can see there, even though his feeder's dropped back, we'd be reeling that in a normal situation, because we know that the trap's been sprung, but because there's so many fish there, we could maybe leave it for, there we go, second or two, and we've got another one. So it's about altering how we fish to the fish that are feeding, and obviously with all these little tench feeding, it's a great opportunity to show you guys how I would target the smaller species in your lake. And you can see there, we've got a lovely little soft rod, which is absorbing the lunges of these fish. I've watched a lot of top method anglers fishing this style. You see, if you were to visit venues such as Lindome Lakes, Bonsai Lake at Lindome used to be a prime example of how to fish this small method feeder, small carp or small F1s, this style. There's some very good anglers doing it. So we want to try and get the line sunk, but at the same time be in touch with the feeder all the time with the rod tip. I'm saying we've got probably a 2-inch bend in the tip at all times. There we go, another one. And don't get me wrong, it's not just a method for catching smaller fish, because we've had some beautiful carp today. Had some really big fish, up to 8 or 9 pounds, some of them. But when you have got a chance to catch a load of these smaller fish, it's a great way to fish. And like I say, isn't it great to come to a venue where you can catch some fish that I'm saying we don't get to see very often anymore. And he may be small, but I think that's a lovely way to end our hybrid feeder session up against islands.